Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host this Red Cloud webinar on silver exploration. With the silver price on a tear this year, this is an exciting time to invest in the space. My special guests today are Jorge Ramiro Monroy, President and CEO, and Lauren Megaw, Head of Investor Relations for Reyna Silver. During today's webinar, Jorge and Lauren will provide an overview and outlook of the company's achievements and their exploration plans going forward. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, we need to discuss some fine print. During this Reyna Silver webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Reyna corporate presentation. This can be found on the company's website, reynasilver.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Reyna. And now I'm delighted to introduce Jorge Ramiro Monroy and Lauren Megaw, who will present the Reyna story. As the company's name suggests, Reyna is focused on silver exploration, though I will say they also have encountered a fair amount of gold in places as well. And they have 4 projects, 2 in Mexico and 2 in Nevada. What's exciting here, 3 of the projects are prospective for carbonate replacement deposits, or CRD, while the 4th has unusually high-grade native silver with additional gold. And there may be some other secrets encountered on their properties as well. So I'd like to now turn it over to Jorge and Lauren to update you on Reyna.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to Red Cloud for giving us the opportunity to present Reyna Silver to you all today. I'll start the presentation. Today with me is Lauren Megaw. I'll be introducing her a little bit further in the presentation. Reyna Silver, our motto is high-grade district scale. And as you can see in the title, we follow what it's called an ore systems approach to exploration. And we'll be talking about that later in the presentation. I will be making forward-looking statements. As Tim mentioned, please do your own research when you're considering investing in our company. So to give you a little bit of a snapshot of our company, what we've done is we put together what we believe is an incredible high-quality portfolio of 4 assets where we're doing exploration on projects that are a combination of, some of them are brownfield projects having former producing mines, or in the vicinity or of a district that had some historic potential, and we're basically moving forward on those assets. We have put together a team that's led by Peter Megaw. The history of our company is related to Mag Silver, and Peter is one of the co-founders of Mag Silver. Our 2 original assets came from Mag Silver, and with that deal, Peter came along with us. We have a lot of institutional investors in our company. We are close to our 4th year of being a public company, and through that time, I think we've done a good job at getting a set of investors that believe in the vision and the philosophy of the company. We are well financed for success, having just closed recently our financing. We have, as I said, 4 assets, 2 in Mexico, 2 in Nevada. In Mexico are the ones that I was mentioning to you that came from Mag Silver. And even prior to Mag Silver, there were assets that Dr. Peter Megaw had put together in preparation for the IPO of Max Silver. Gigy is actually Peter's doctor officio. As Tim mentioned, we have a very unique asset called Bapis, which is a very exciting historic native silver district. Lauren is going to talk to us in more detail about this project. And then 3 projects that are carbonate replacement deposits. I was prepared to give you a lengthy explanation of carbonate replacement deposits, but Lauren asked me not to do it, so I'm gonna let her do it herself. But we have 1 project in Mexico called Gigy, and then 2 in Nevada, Medicine Springs and Griffin, which the Griffin project will be the main focus of our exploration during this summer season. The near-term catalyst, we're in the final stages of producing a A43-101 compliant technical report for the Griffin project in Nevada. It's not a resource report, but it is a compliant 43-101 report. That the reason we're doing it is so that we can speak about the incredible amount of information that we inherited with this project in a way that allows us to speak about it in a more comprehensive way that we have been able to so far. We're going to be drilling through the summer, and then the fall will be the time where we convey our drill results. In addition, we're doing sampling, mapping, and geophysics on the back of what already is an incredible amount of data, and I will let Lauren tell you more about that data soon. Let me introduce you a little bit to our management team. One of the things that's amazing about our team is our main exploration geologists, Reyna and Manuel, have been working with Peter Megaw pretty much for their entire career. Reyna, for instance, was with Peter when they mapped the Juanicipio project, which many of you are familiar with, Max Silver's big success story, which it's now a producing mine, the highest grade silver mine I believe in the world, if not in the world, definitely in North America. And a really incredible story of discovery. And Reyna was part of that team, and then Manuel himself, integral in the discovery of Cinco de Mayo for Max Silver, and of course Peter Megaw. Just in case some of you might not be familiar with him, as I mentioned, Peter is our main technical advisor, co-founder of Max Silver, and he happens to also be Lauren Megaw's father, and we'll introduce Lauren in a second. We also have Peter Jones, who's our chairman, who is the former CEO of Hot Bay Minerals, and somebody who's been a great chairman to the company since we went public. And then just a quick introduction myself. My name is Jorge. I'm the CEO of the company. I'm also the founder of the company. Started the company really taking into account the advice that Peter gave me on what would make a successful silver company. He encouraged me to focus on assets that have the potential for high grade and for district scale potential. I remember at the time I said, I reached out to Peter and I said, Peter, do you know any assets that have, I'm looking for 100 million ounces of silver, above 300 grams per ton silver. And he told me, well, there aren't any. So you have to go and find them. And that's really, what the reason why we have put Reyna Silver together to put together a company for, looking to make those type of discoveries. I'll give you a quick snapshot of our capital structure. Having 4 years as a public company, we have just under 200 million shares outstanding, and then our market cap is 36 million Canadian. We have, as of last quarter, 6.3 million Canadian in cash. We have a relatively good trading volume. We have, in this list you can see that we have warrants. A good number of them have, expiry dates that are forthcoming, and then of course the ones that are the lower prices are the ones from the most recent financing. So with that, I would like to introduce Lauren Megaw. Lauren is, as I mentioned, Peter Megaw's daughter. She has her training is as a geologist. However, in Reyna Silver, she has been an integral part of the investor relations team. But and I was complimenting her this morning. She really is somebody who's a big believer in the company and rolls her sleeves, for whatever the company needs. More importantly, she has an incredible skill in translating geology to terms that investors can understand, but also she's an integral part of our technical team meetings. So she has given some amazing input for us. Very lucky to have her. I always like to tell people, it's so great to have young people joining the business that have so much enthusiasm and passion for exploration, for discoveries, and for geology. Okay, with that introduction, Lauren, I'll pass the presentation to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jorge, and thank you for that lovely intro. Now we get to what I consider to be the fun part, which is talking about the projects that we think we have, that we believe have such potential. As Jorge was mentioning, we like to go after things that are high grade. We like to go after things that are big, and that's because grade is king and scale is Reyna. For those that you don't know, Reyna is queen in Spanish. And so, of course, you got to start off with a little joke. We're going to focus primarily in this presentation on Griffin. That's because that's where we start drilling this summer. And on top of that, within this 10,000 hectare project, which is essentially 2 Manhattans, absolutely massive project. But we get gold, we get silver, and we get critical metals. And it is an example of when the market's been where it's been. That's when those truly great projects pop loose. And we were able to acquire it, and now we're able to take and look at it from a new angle and see whether or not we can make another massive discovery in Nevada. So if you see where Griffin is, sitting here in the center, above it, you've got the Carlin Trend. So a place that's produced over 130 million ounces of gold. To the south of it, you've got the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend. I mean, you're at site at Griffin, look across the valley, and there's the Cortez camp, which has produced over 40 million ounces of gold. Just 72 kilometers to our south, you have the Eureka district with Ruby Hill. And, you're in this area that has got to be two of the greatest gold mega trends out there. And so, of course, the historic focus on this project is going to be on the gold mineralization. It makes sense. The project is entirely littered with it. But one of the questions that comes up is, how do you find the strongest pieces of mineralization? How do you really hone in on the system? One of the beautiful things at Griffin is, if you see where those red dots are, those are where the carbonate replacement deposits are. So 72 kilometers to the south, in Ruby Hill, I-80 Gold looked underneath their Carlin-type gold deposit, and they found a carbonate replacement deposit. And one of the things that we found so exciting about Griffin is this potential to look at the thing from the full system, to take those gold-only blinders off and instead see how big this thing could be. And we're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is because carbonate replacement deposits are amazing. You get these things that are, when they are deposited, they're continuous. They're zoned and polymetallic, but you get really high recovery rates in the metallurgy. When they get big, they can also get incredibly high grade, and they're related to a source intrusion. So if you look to the left here, just hold with me for a second. We're going to take a moment, do geology, then I'm going to do my best job translating this. So that pink blob that you see there, that's the source intrusion. That's a porphyry. You normally associate that with copper and gold. Coming off of that is acidic mineralized fluid. And when it finds fractures, essentially like the plumbing in the rock, the mineralization goes along those routes And when it comes in contact with carbonate, hence carbonate replacement deposit, you get an acid-base reaction. So you guys have ever done those paper mache volcanoes, the vinegar and the baking soda, and you put it together and it bubbles up. That's what's happening underground, and the metals drop out. And this happens again and again, and the system's creating its own porosity, and it's getting higher and higher grade and bigger. So now that I've said enough fancy words that sounds like I know what I'm talking about, let's look at these things like they're a public transportation system. I find this a lot easier for me, and it's a little more fun too. So imagine that source porphyry is like a bus terminal. And coming from that bus terminal, you have buses. That's your acidic mineralized fluid. And those fractures in the rocks, those are your bus routes. And so the bus leaves the terminal fully loaded with metals, and those metals get off in different neighborhoods. And so when you're close to the bus terminal, you're in the downtown area, we call that the scar. And so there you have higher copper, gold, lead, zinc. Silver's a little bit lower than it is up north, but that's where everything's voluminous. As you make your way further out into the system, you get to the suburbs. We call that the chimney manto portion of the system. And that's where your silver grade lead, zinc goes way up, along with some critical metals. And then at the very end, the elements that fell asleep on the back of the bus finally get kicked off. That's our alteration halo. And we can use the ability to understand and identify which neighborhood you're in to move your way around. And the other component here is we're taking this ore systems approach. So, we're not just looking at, historically you would describe something as being a chimney manto or a skarn or a porphyry because that's what stuck out of the ground. But that's all part of a continuum, and it's not just a linear feature. These things end up looking like big branching, almost tree-like feature. And so our question is, let's look at that full system. And that's particularly important when you look at something like Griffin, where we see these super strong structures that are carrying the mineralization. We get silver grades up to 2,000 grams at surface. And of the key features that are associated with the big CRDs, we have stepped foot on 8 out of the 13. We know a couple of these other ones are probably out there, but since our team hasn't directly put their boots on them yet, they're not checked. The other consideration is, what is the gold mineralization in this analogy of public transportation? What does Carlin type gold mean? Well, in CRDs, or in this analogy, you can think of them as being like a whole bunch of little cars. And since your bus routes are following those main boulevards, those main thoroughfares throughout your deposit city, and so forth, you can also think about your cars as take those main routes before then going everywhere. And so one of our ideas and one of our thoughts at Griffin is, by exploring for the CRD mineralization and targeting those big structures, those big thoroughfares, that will allow us to better understand the infrastructure of the whole system, which will then allow us to better understand the gold mineralization as well, killing two birds with one stone, as it were. And one of the things that we're particularly excited about here is that we have what are apparently long-lived structures that have been pathways for repeated mineralizing events. So you can see these big, long, linear stripes here. I mean, some of them are, the shortest one's almost 3 kilometers long. Some of these areas, the scale here is something to remember, considering how big these things are. And we're just 72 kilometers north of Eureka. We see the potential here for these stacked systems. And the other component is CRDs are self-scavenging systems. Hold on. Sorry, my dog really wanted to stay alone. So one of the cool things that we were able to build upon is that the historic 23 core holes that have been drilled at Griffin were beautifully preserved and maintained. That allowed us to go through them and study them and test them, and that allows us to use them as a launch pad for the upcoming drilling program. One of the things that's interesting to us is from a CRD perspective in exploration, target those main structures, those main pathways right off the top. And that isn't always the case when you're targeting parlance. And so one of the pieces that we're looking forward to do is actually going after some of these structures. And as you can see, you can put gold on top and boom, the gold shows up. You layer the silver on top and that really highlights. And then there's the other component, which is the copper. So we have this area called Saddler. And one of the things that we're excited about with Saddler is every 20 to 30 meters, you have these structures that are bleeding copper mineralization. And I mean, the results there are going upwards of 5 to upwards of almost 12% copper. I mean, and we're talking percentages here at surface. And those are also associated with some of our best silver numbers. Those are also associated with some of our best gold numbers. And we're really excited to be taking these targets on this summer because one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is as you get closer to that heat source, your copper numbers tend to go up because copper likes to be in the downtown. It doesn't want to go too far from the source. And for us, identifying from a CRD perspective where the source of the system is, where everything's more voluminous, and then working your way into the higher grade mineralization, that's an exploration factor. One of the other exciting parts and sort of the blue sky potential at Griffin as sort of its X factor is when you get into Nevada, you can start talking actually economic styles of porphyries. Then we have this area of gold, now calling it the James Bond zone. We're building upon Agnico's drill hole 007, perfectly set us up, where they cut the side of a structure, and at surface, that structure runs 25 grams of gold. They hit the side of it, and they got 1.5 meters of almost 9 grams gold. One of the first things we're going to be doing at Griffin is trying to determine what that structure looks like for its depth, and take a whack at the whole thing. In addition to that, see how long that structure carries on, because we see evidence of it for almost as long. On top of that, we have this extensive CRD style mineralization all throughout the property. We have kilometer-long, highly anomalous silver, lead, zinc mineralization, and that has largely been ignored because it wasn't the most gaudy of the gold style mineralization. And so we look forward to pulling Griffin apart, understanding the gold system, and by doing so, potentially make a truly significant discovery in Nevada, because Griffin has the potential for being at least a triple threat. And even if we're right about one portion of this place, this could be a lot of fun and create a lot of value for investors in Reyna Silver. Being cognizant of time, but still loving the other projects, I am going to briefly, and if anyone has any questions about these, especially, well, any of them really, happy to talk about them at another time. So Medicine Springs is one of our other projects in Nevada. This is where we took that CRD model, moved it up. We see 11 out of the 13 key features associated with the big CRDs here. And, the way that you can think about these features is that you've got to be in an area where there's a potential for a source. You have to have enough carbonate that it can get big. You've got to be seeing high grade at the beginning, because if you're not seeing high grade, why bother? And the rest of these features essentially tell you that the bus left the terminal as many times as possible fully loaded. And when we started drilling at Medicine Springs, we wanted to identify whether or not this was a Reyna Silver quality project. And so what we did is, in that first drill hole, it was nearly 800 meters long, to see whether or not it had room to grow. Everything that you see in blue, that's carbonate. So check, room to grow. Then on top of that, on that first drill hole, we also hit 2.4 meters of over 1 kilo silver. check, high grade. And then with the rest of our reconnaissance drilling, what we saw was confirmation that we are looking at an incredibly potent system. And, within that 650 meter by 1.75 kilometer reconnaissance drilling area, we hit high grade mineralization in 7 out of the 9 structures we intersected. One of the other things I'd bring your attention to is you see these little ellipsoids there. Those are the silver, lead, zinc, copper anomalies associated with our jasperoids. So jasperoids in this case provide us a window to what's going on at depth and can help identify, okay, where are you getting closer to source? Where's your mineralization going to become more significant? And one of the things that we're delighted there is that those ellipsoids line up with a significant MT anomaly at depth here. And so on top of that, we also see this, it's an island of resistivity. So it's a quick transition from conductive to resistive, which tells you something's happening. And then when you have something like that associated with your highest silver grades to date, you pay attention to that. And this is one of the reasons why we've instigated, doing some additional field work here and see if we can really refine where we need to go at Griffin and make sure that we have the quiver of future targets as refined as possible at any of our projects. And then, of course, we have Gigy. So Gigy is, in large part what started all of this with the carbonate replacement deposits. It's at the heart of the Santo Eulalia mining district. You have a place that's produced over 500 million ounces of silver, average grade of over 310 grams silver, combined 15% lead zinc. And that all came from 2 suburbs. The source of this thing, the downtown, those have yet to be found. And the premise at Gigy is we have extensive research on the historic mineralization. That's where my father did his PhD. The question is, where's the source? Where's that skarn? Can we work the 2 ends against each other? And the reason we have to do that is because we believe it's hiding underneath a thin layer of volcanics. And one of the things that this group of geologists has done in the last 40 years is identify near misses and be able to make major discoveries in covered zones of CRDs. And for those of you who look at this thing on the left side, that's a schematic of the West Camp. And think it looks like a spaghetti monster. I would like to make note that those 2 little triangles that you see stacked on top there, those are 2 Eiffel Towers, which you could stack inside of the Potosi chimney. These systems can be incredibly high grade and they can be big as well. And one of the things that we're excited about with Gigy is it's more than proven that it has the potential to get big and high grade. And as we've been working on it, it tells us we're getting closer to the source. We have 1,200 meters of some of the best limestone host rock in human history sitting there. And we've intersected these things that are called feeder bleeder structures, which are essentially side streets off of suburbs. And one of the things that's coming about with Gigy is the recognition that not only are we paying attention to where that source in that downtown area is, but how many big cities have you been in that only has 1 or 2 major suburbs? And one of our big questions that has come out with Gigy is we had this geophysics anomaly that was sitting out well undercover. And one of the pieces that we wanted to pull together was, how can we determine whether or not that anomaly is being caused by an over-thickened volcanic layer? Or is that something that we need to be taking seriously because the structures are also potentially going over there as well? And Rene Ramirez, our project geologist, has been championing this target for several years. And so we decided to take advantage of our relationship with Explore Tech AI on their machine learning geophysics program and see whether or not we could determine what's going on with this mag anomaly. And what it does is essentially gives you the 1,000 best case scenarios of the geophysics interpretation, and it layers them on top of each other. And then you design a drill hole that intersects as many of those instances as possible. And one of the things that we are particularly excited about with this anomaly is that even as those metrics have been moved around, that anomaly remains. And so, that's a very exciting piece for us moving forward as well. Then at Bapis, which, gosh, how can you not love this deposit? I mean, 300 million ounces, over 1,500 grams per ton of silver. That's 1 month's production in 1906. That's 350,000 ounces of silver. Each one of those are 25 kilogram bars. That's not even an exceptional month. Historically, the main mineralization that was mined there, the main ore mineral, was native silver. And when we say native silver, what we mean is essentially it's growing as sterling. It's not a silver sulfide. It's just silver. I mean, I quite literally pulled a crystal off the back of one of the old ore specimens and had it poured straight into my ring. I mean, that's the kind of grades that we're talking about here. And how they would work is you'd have these striped structures over 3 to 5 meters. They'd blow out. And at the core of them, you'd have 0.5 meter to 2 meters, 30 to 80 meters on level, hundreds of meters down of this native silver core that ran upwards of 2% of silver. And that whole structure would then taper down 30 to 80 meters, blow out again. That 1,500 grams per ton silver, that's the diluted grade. And our question has always been, because we're trying to figure out how much bigger is this thing? That doesn't come from nowhere. And so when we stepped out in 21 from the historic district, we found gold. More high-grade silver, but we also found gold. Mineable widths and grades of gold. Over 3.5 meters of over 8 grams. And we said, let's figure out what's going on with the framework. Similar to what we've been doing with the historic work at Griffin, where we've gone in and we're looking at pulling apart all the pieces and reconfiguring our understanding of the infrastructure. That's what we started doing at Bapis. And so we did structural work and sampling and geophysics and pulled that all together, and it resulted in these layered anomalies. So you get a structural anomaly with a sampling anomaly with a geophysics. Some of them were hiding under cover, but we also had an area where we saw that, which was also in a historic area. And we decided to let's test it there, because if we can understand it here, maybe we can also take it to those undercover areas as well. And so between the Escritorio and Todos los Santos vein, we hit this new native silver vein. And one of the things that I'd point out here is you can see the white with the silver in it. That's the historic style mineralization. But what we're excited about is actually this black thing in the center. So that's a breccia, which essentially is high energy rock that's been injected in. The white parts are more of that calcited native silver. But the thing that's so exciting to us is that the cement, it's called the matrix, it's holding that all together, is a silver sulfide called the camphite. And historically, that was the feature that was noted just before those big blowouts that led into the ore chutes. And so we feel like we're really close to one of these. The question is, which way do you go? So we're going to go back to what's brought us success at Bapis so far, which is doing that good reiterative work, doing that sampling, doing the solid geology that leads you there, especially because one of the questions that's been asked here is, how much bigger could this system be? Are there potentially even more mineralization if you didn't see it crop out? And that was reinforced by our drill target that we hit in hole 58. We're just 3 meters from surface. We hit over 30 meters of silver mineralization with 9 meters of over 600 grams silver. And what I would leave you with is our focus for 2024 is going to be on Griffin. We'd be absolutely silly not to focus on Griffin. I mean, it's got gold, it's got silver, it's got critical metals. It's the newest project to us, but it's by far the most advanced. It's the one that we feel we're closest to in terms of making a major discovery. But the other thing that we're doing, because we're thinking long-term, we're thinking value for our shareholders, is making sure that we have our drill targets at our other 3 assets as poised, sharpened, and ready to go in that quiver, so that when the market shifts or sentiment towards Mexico shifts, we are ready to go, we're ready to deploy, because the people who are ready and have done the hard work, they're the ones that make the big win. You can see that historically with other companies, and so we're trying to learn from their experience and do it through Reyna Silver as well. Thank you guys so much for your time, and of course, we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Great. Thank you, Jorge and Lauren, for the very informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already do have a few questions. First, obviously, Lauren's father, Peter Megaw, recently announced that he's retiring from an active role at Mag Silver. Will he continue to be active with Reyna, or will he look to pass the baton there as well?
Okay, so on the retirement thing, he retired from administration. Essentially, my dad's least favorite part about his job, which he adores, is paperwork and admin. As part of the deal with MAG, when they co-founded and realized that they were going into production, the idea was, hey, once we get into production, we're going to let you go and do what you love, which is exploration. And it's what he's the best at. And so essentially what has happened is they've released him from having to do the part he dislikes. And now he gets to go to the fields and make it sound like he's a happy pony. But I guess he is. Like, he's so delighted to now being able to focus purely on the geology and exploration and discovery, which is what drives him. I'm about to be in the field with him for a week next week at Griffin. I don't know if he has it in him to like retire in the typical sense. He's not made for golf. He's not. So we still get to use all of his time, maybe more actually.
Oh,
your audio's off, Jorge.
Yeah, Jorge is muted still.
How about, can you hear me now?
Yes.
And I was just sharing that we recently did a full relogging of the historic core at Griffin, and I believe Peter was there for a little over a week with Lauren and the whole team. So just to emphasize, he's very much involved, and obviously since Lauren joined the team, he's gets maybe more calls and more discussions of Reyna Silver over the family dinner table than he would probably want.
Definitely more than my mom wants.
Another question here. Now, you had mentioned this, but obviously the things you're looking for in Nevada are not necessarily what Nevada is known most for. Are there other projects within the Battle Mountain or Carlin Trends that you find most comparable to Griffin or Medicine Springs?
I think taking a look at Ruby Hill, which I-80's been looking at in the Eureka district, is a absolute fantastic parallel to what we see at Griffin. There you have a historic high-grade silver lead zinc CRD system that had a gold. It's what made Eureka. And you see that same style of mineralization from historic production in the 2 smaller CRD deposits within the Medicine Springs, or within the Griffin project as well, so Union and Mineral Hill. And one of the things that's interesting about the Eureka district is once they found the Archimedes pit and that Carlin style mineralization, that's what people typically associated with Eureka. But it's always been a huge CRD system, and what's happened is they've started looking underneath and they found super high grade polymetallics with, once again, that gold kicker, and now it's sulfide. And if we can go and do something similar or better at Griffin, we will be absolutely happy with that.
Great. Now, we did have a couple of similar questions here in terms of you have 4 projects, obviously, 4 interesting projects, but it's a fair amount to manage then, and obviously you have to prioritize. So do you have the resources to continue work on all the projects, or what is the highest priority? And one question specifically about Gigy seems to have gone to the back burner, even though it used to be maybe considered the flagship. Is it the rise of the Nevada projects, or are there other reasons for that?
So I'd say it's a twofold thing. One, our focus this year is going to be on Griffin, and it's for a couple of reasons. I mean, mainly, if we didn't drill at Griffin this summer, we would be absolutely ridiculous to do that. It's just the targets are so blatant from a CRD perspective. The mineralization is so strong. It appears to be such a significant asset. And we decided to bring one of the best, if not the best, CRD exploration teams in the world up from Mexico to tackle this project. And so we're putting the full force of our whole technical team at Griffin this year. And, the other component is that, with the sentiment towards Mexico shifting, the Mexican assets, even if we had good results like out of Bapis, weren't getting the love, even though, the mining law is predominantly focused and shifts are prominently focused on open pit. We're not looking at open pit potential at either of our assets in Mexico. We get lumped in all the way around. And so, one of the things we're keeping an eye on is June 2nd and the Mexican election. And the other aspect with having assets in Mexico, you can drill year round for about the same price. Whereas in Nevada, drilling in the winter is significantly more expensive. So we chose from a strategic reason for, I guess, all 3 of those reasons. I said twofold at the beginning, but for all 3 of those reasons, amazing targets. I mean, how can you not go after some of the targets that we have at Griffin? That's why we chose to focus on Griffin for the summer, and then see whether or not the market turns or sentiment towards Mexico shifts, or what the results out of Griffin are. And so, we're just trying to stay dynamic, but also make sure that we are set up for success moving forward.
And then I would add a couple of things to what Lauren just mentioned. I think the question is very fair. At some point, you do have to, focus. However, you do always have the possibility to find JV partners for, 1, 2, or even 3 of the projects we have in hand. So that process is something that it's a process that we started since last year. It's very proactively engaging with all the potential people who might have interest in the projects, and putting them in front of the data, inviting them on site visits. However, philosophically, and this is something that I really like about Peter and the team that we've put together, is the core expertise that our company has is in taking a project from basically where we are now to a discovery. We're gonna stay dynamic, as Lauren said, especially sort of seeing what happens with the market. If silver flies and our market cap soars, we're actually quite comfortable exploring more than one project at a time. We've done it already in this company, but our teams have done it as well. I think the element of Mexico, we do like that has Mexico. This year we decided, I don't know if people know, but I figured maybe I'd take a second to mention this for those of you for whom maybe not just Reyna Silver, but you may have other investments in Mexico, and you may or may not be aware of, but the election is coming on actually this Sunday. So so from our management point of view, we decided let's not decide to put too much money to work in Mexico until we know what happens in the election. The reality is the mining law for the last 6 years of this previous government, the president kept yapping negatively about mining. But the reality is that for companies like ours that have on the ground silver exploration, we didn't have any adverse effects to our operations. Mexico remains an incredible place to work. We got our permits faster than in the US. Our drilling is a fraction of the cost of the US. We can drill year round. The projects are not as remote. It really is an amazing jurisdiction. I think that the next few weeks will shed some light as to what happens in Mexico. We remain cautiously optimistic, but that's actually something that's very interesting. And the election is not a foregone conclusion. The opposition still could win, and that I think would be positive for mining. But even if the new government comes in, the hope is that they are able to work with mining. Like Lauren said, really so far they have been going against open pit mining. That's sort of been the only thing that they have really disturbed. But other than that, no major changes that would affect a company like ours. And then I think that because I can read the questions here, there was a corollary about specifically a Gigy. It's in the back burner. It is a little bit on the back burner in the sense of just strategically waiting to see what happens in Mexico, but it's forefront in in our regard for the project, and something that very much we would like to find an opportunity to get to it as soon as we can, whether it's ourselves directly or through a JV partner.
Great. We have a couple of questions here that are a little more on the capital structure side of things, but obviously you had done a financing recently. Kind of looking at who are your lead shareholders. One question is, who are the top 3 shareholders and how much do they own?
Yeah, so I think the biggest shareholder at the moment is management, of which I'm personally the largest shareholder. And then in terms of institutional investors, I would say probably the single biggest investor is Sprott, and then Sprott of Toronto. But there's also a lot of fraud-related entities, including Rick Rule, who are significant shareholders in the company. And then we have a group of high net worth individuals out of Asia that are probably own about 10% of the company. And they're an amazing group of shareholders who have been at every single financing, no matter what the price is. They believe in the company. They continue to add to the registry, and a group of investors that obviously I'm constantly in contact with. And so far they're believing in our vision and helping us see this through. Hopefully, at least one major discovery and hopefully more.
Great. And one question, ever popular: how much cash do you have on hand, and how far will that get you with your current plans?
Yeah. So we closed basically this year on $6 million, and we hope that that's going to be enough for drilling this year. And then, we'll see when the time to raise money again is. It will be market dependent. We have the flexibility of the reason I mentioned the market is, you've seen how difficult it got last year, where our board was encouraging us to look at preserving cash, et cetera, et cetera. At the moment, we're about to start drilling in Griffin. And then, we'll see where the market is at, because we have also a lot of warrants that are in the money. So, sorry, not quite in the money. Some of them are in the money, a small amount of them. But a big amount of them are there at 20 cents. So if those become a source of financing over the next few months, we can either do more meters at Griffin, or we might decide to go and have a small drill program at Batopilas before the year end. So I would say emphasis on remaining flexible and monitoring the market, but definitely fully funded for a significant drill campaign this summer at Griffin. That would be, I guess, the main message. And then with the balance of the cash that we have from there, we'll have to make a strategic decision, as to whether, there is a cutoff in Nevada, as Lauren said, in terms of seasonality. and that those winters sometimes come a little bit earlier than others, and sometimes you can push into December. So we'll work with those things, but the main message I will leave you with is fully financed to do a meaningful program at Griffin.
Great. And I think that's all the questions we have. One question I might just ask, just to summarize and review, but what are maybe some key catalysts or news items we might look forward to in the coming months?
Yeah, and I can actually tie that in with the last question that just popped up in the Q&A section. So, one of the things that we've been working on is this 43101 compliant technical report. We brought in an independent to do it. But one of the benefits that we have is because of the good preservation and custody of the historic data relative to this project that we acquired from a group of mature and well-established geologists, we were essentially able to put this, the geologist was able to put this together using that historic data, as well as doing some strategic re-assaying to confirm on things as well. And so what that's allowing us to do, and essentially what we're doing with that 43101 compliant technical report, is talking about that historic data, having ownership of that historic data in such a way that we feel comfortable, like bringing it to the market and explain why we're so excited about Griffin as well. And the other component there, so like that's a potential catalyst. In addition to that, obviously we have the drilling. And what we see out there, one of the things I mentioned is typically what we do with drilling press releases is we do the full drill campaign and we put that out in one set so that we're putting it out in context of itself. And then, one of the other things that we're going to be doing is we're doing some additional sampling. We've got a younger team with better knees, and so we're going to be doing a big sampling program over the ridge this year as well. And we're going to use some hyperspectral, which will allow us to, the historic hyperspectral was like 1 to 5 meters resolution. So now we're going to do a 1-to-1 resolution. And so to wrap that up, the answer is technical report. We'll see if we get anything out of the good geologic work that's required for making sure we're going into the most prospective spots within incredibly prospective spots. And then, of course, we've got the drilling and what comes out of that. Are those enough catalysts for you?
Great. Well, I would like to thank Jorge and Lauren for presenting today. And thank you, everyone on the line, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day and happy investing.